So that's the Jaden Daniels report. Week 3 update. Excellent. As for the play caller, Kliff Kingsbury, I thought also had an excellent game. One of the things that I really love is how Kliff just messes with defenses' tendencies with their eyes. And as I was watching this game, Logan, I just kept thinking, being a linebacker playing this offense means you're in hell. The misdirection, the formations. I mean, in this game, they use an unbalanced line at one point on a direct snap to a running back. The first play of the game, there's some serious misdirection. First play of the second half, there's some other misdirection, which I think is like an important, caveat of saying, hey, first play of each half, we're messing with linebackers and their keys and their eyes to kind of throw you off kilter. We're going to put this in your mind immediately to mess you up for the entire day. Like there is so much good stuff that Kliff is doing. But as you watch it and as you watch it back, like what sticks out to you of some of the stuff that you like the most and why this offense was able to put up 38 points beyond the supreme execution by the quarterback that we just talked about for 20 minutes?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting watching Kliff call a game because it doesn't stack and layer the way that, like maybe Sean or Kyle layers stuff, where it's like we're calling this to make sure we run this. And I feel like he's calling plays that he likes. Like there's probably a sequence to it that I'm not seeing, but there's no it's not as measured and like we're doing this to get to here. It's like, oh, I like this play in this situation. You mentioned the wildcat look where they faked the reverse, like that. There was so much grass on that play that probably could have been a bigger run if B-Rob hits the cutback sooner. But love that, right? They install a trap that they call in the low red zone, like that. It's just like that. You didn't see any kind of trap setup play before. It's like we're just going to call trap and we're just going to run it, and it's going to be a touchdown, Austin Eckler, or we're going to run this screen, Austin, and we're really good at running screens. So I don't know. I just think there's just like it's a feel thing with him. It's kind of like how Jay used to call a game. Like Jay was, I think, a very good offensive coordinator, but it's just like a feel. It's like, oh, like they're doing this. I want to get this called. And there's a really good example of what we're talking about. Like the first sequence, that first offensive drive, they run that fake GT. So they're running like guard tackle pull to the offensive left. They give it to Austin Eckler kind of on this jet sweep action. B-Rob looks like almost like a pitch man leading out, and they just really stress everybody. It ends up being a 5-yard gain or 8-yard gain. They go hurry up with the same personnel, which I think is brilliant. Again, really good play design in terms of stacking these together. And you run a roll pass with Austin Eckler kind of is like a hide back, like the fullback hiding in the backfield for the first down. And then you run a screen to Austin Eckler, right? Like all those things are really good. And then I think this, again, kind of illuminates our point, is you get to 1st and 10. They try to run what I would call like a fake choice. So Austin Eckler kind of does the Christian McCaffrey motion from the backfield out. And then usually he's running like a wheel, he's running a choice, and that outside receiver, Noah Brown's running a post. And so you run this kind of choice setup where he kind of stutters his feet, the linebacker gets a little tight, and then he runs a go. And so you want to throw that go, and it's there, but it's just a little bit murky and a little bit muddy. And Jaden kind of gives it a good look, but he's able to then, on first down, get you to 2nd and 3. So we didn't take a loss. We didn't throw an incomplete pass. We didn't throw an interception. And we're in a 2nd and 3 situation. And it really is comforting to an offensive coordinator because then you run a zone read and then you take you know what I mean? It's just like the way you're able to stack plays and get out of stuff is awesome. Because then even on this drive, you run the zone read the next play, right? Great job. I think Cincinnati had an excellent plan for the zone read with their defensive ends in terms of staying square. You take a sack on 3rd and 1, and then 4th and 2, he throws the slant to Luke McCaffrey. But you're in a 4th and 2 because of the scramble that your quarterback took on 2nd down. And again, those play calls prior to that are excellent, but you can't call a perfect game. You need execution to go with it. And I think you see the happy balance there of like kind of Kliff calling good plays and maybe not stacking them in this like really nuanced Kyle Shanahan West Coast way, but you're also getting the elevation from the quarterback to allow you the opportunity there to go for it on 4th down. I think that's just a really cool kind of symbiotic relationship. And then I know I'm rambling a little bit, but the feel on when to call that shot play to Terry also, especially is excellent. It's like it's 2nd and 5. Let's let this thing rip. We have, if it's 3rd and 5, no big deal, but like you're insulated in terms of down and distance. Really good feel. And again, I can't give Kliff enough credit for what he's calling and how he's calling stuff. And it's impressive by both people, honestly.
I think that, with Jaden as well, like you talked about plays that he likes, it seems. And so this is where like scheme meets psychology, meets data and analytics, meets whatever else goes into this stuff. And it's like Kliff might not have this, kind of formula almost that Kyle and Sean and them have that, or maybe he has a different one that you just haven't picked up on yet because you haven't played in this offense the way that you played in theirs. But in this one, like, if he's calling plays that Jaden is comfortable with, you're going to get a higher level of execution because he's comfortable with it. Like, there's a confidence that goes with performance and that he's able to figure out what it is that his guys like and how to keep them comfortable. But I also do think that there's like an unpredictability to it because it just feels like there's guys going everywhere. It's like a screen to the right, screen to the left. We got GT, then we got GT, the kind of fake GT, if you will. Like on that first play of the game, the guard and the tackle, I think it was, like they pull to the left, B-Rob follows them, but the ball goes to the right to Austin. Like there's stuff like that where you have this eye candy, and then all of a sudden you get down in the red zone and we're throwing a thick 6 to Trent Scott. He's hopping out there. Let's go. Like it's just so big time in terms of the what you're able to get, and the offense feels like it's flowing. And my question ultimately in the long term is going to be, does that unpredictability become predictable if he keeps running the same stuff? It's like, oh, I like this play in 2nd and 10. And eventually defensive coordinators are like, oh, Kliff likes this play in 2nd and 10. We're all over it. And is that why he's maybe struggled late in seasons? And so there still are questions to be answered. I don't think Kliff Kingsbury's figured everything out as an OC because there's no such thing in the NFL, right? Defenses constantly adapt. You're constantly having to make adjustments. But for right now, what they're doing, I think the thing that I love the most and that I think is really cool is, one, the creativity, but two, like you said, using the personnel of like, let's get in 2 back, and that's a great personnel grouping for us. And then we don't lose any formational flexibility because we have guys that can line up all over the place and do a bunch of stuff and kind of put defenses in a bad spot that way. We'll catch you in your personnel and then abuse you the way that we want to. But I think there is obviously a lot of great stuff that's ultimately leading to what we hear about Kliff from guys like Zach in the offseason of like, he's so player friendly because he continually finds ways to get guys the play they like, whether it's a deep ball to Terry, all the stuff that Jaden likes on down the list.
Yeah. And I think, even on the next drive, you see some of the stuff you're talking about there. You have a zone read. And again, that was pretty successful for him. I think it got less successful as the game goes on. But they're in a 2nd and 3, and they run a keeper, which I really like keepers. I think it insulates quarterbacks. That's not something that, at least when Kyler was when he was with Kyler in Arizona, I didn't see a ton of it, but they're running more keepers here, and it's covered up, right? And so is that a dead play? Yeah, probably normally, but Jaden's able to scramble for a first down, right? Then you're able to get to a 1st and 10. It's a neutral run, 2nd and 10, right? They run that little drift concept where they stack the 2 running backs behind each other. Do you remember that? It's like B-Rob's in front, Austin's in back, and they just jet each other out. They don't really have anything else that they've run off of that. There's no run off of that. They just run this motion in the backfield. And you think, oh man, you need to set that up. You need to show a run to kind of get the linebackers to draw it. But the linebackers play it exactly how you'd expect them to. They split action. They run a little drift behind it. And it's just like that little drift or strike route that Kyle runs a ton of. Like, he runs it because we've run outside zone to the left 12 times in this game so far, and that linebacker has to fit the backside B gap. Here it's like, looks like, I know you're going to match the flat, so like match this flat and we're going to throw this in right behind it. So to me, that's a really good example of kind of like, that's a good play. Just call a good play. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
You don't need to overthink it. Like, they'll play it the way you want them to play it. By rule, they have to do it this way. Don't overthink it. Just call it. And again, I go back to the fact that Jaden Daniels on 2nd and 3 gets you to the 1st and 10. And I think it's just this perfect mixture of allowing Kliff to get deep into his bag in terms of play call. Like, I think about Tampa Bay and how kind of herky-jerky the offense felt because they weren't really on schedule. And I think over the last 2 weeks, you've seen how effective he is at knowing when to call these specialty plays. We talked about the one where they're in the unbalanced line, they shift to Wildcat, and they run that play. Like, they did the same thing the week prior with a throwback to Austin versus the New York Giants. He kind of has a good feel for when to call those plays. And then, again, maximizing the player and the player helping to elevate and keep you on schedule in terms of first down. I think it just shows you how important that offensive rhythm is and staying, like, I'm going to use the word ahead of the chains, but like at least able to stay congruent with the change throughout as you're calling a game. So it's a cool pairing. And again, Jaden again made the right decisions at the right times. And as an offensive play caller, it just lets you get even further into what you do well. So.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about some of the other players then. Obviously, this is Terry's best game in a long time. He kind of is unlocked. And, one thing that I hinted at earlier that I wanted to, kind of, I guess this ties together what we were just talking about with Kliff and getting to Terry is I feel like Jaden earned the right to throw more deep shots in this game. And what I mean by that is Jaden was missing those opportunities, not seeing them, not throwing them earlier in the season. And I think Kliff got to a point where he's like, why am I going to call him if I'm just going to then have my quarterback sitting back there behind this offensive line, like facing the rush, and he doesn't necessarily see them as well as we want him to yet. And that's why I think like early in this game, Jaden throwing those two to Terry that he missed is actually so important because it's like Kliff saw that and went, oh, okay, you see it now. You're going to hit these later. And he called a couple of extra ones later in the game, so you see a few less of those screens. I actually don't think the play calling was that different in this game compared to the others. Maybe but one or two, later in the game versus one or two extra screens. And he hits them, and it looks completely different. So what did you see on that front in terms of I guess the simple version of the question without all that setup is like, why did Terry get the ball deep today when he hadn't so far this season?
Well, I mean, like I've said this, and we've been saying this on the show for the last 3 weeks, is like there are opportunities for Terry that have been missed. And this is a game where the opportunities to Terry have been hit. And it's like, cool, Terry's in the offense now. But we like this, and everyone's like, oh, how are they going to get Terry involved? Like I was doing a thing with Grant and Danny on game day. They were out in Cincinnati. Or wherever they were, Indiana. I don't know. They were in that like little trifecta of city, wherever it is. Anyway.
Yeah, they were in a casino in Kentucky, which is somehow right next to Cincinnati, because America.
Somehow magically.
It's a big country that gets very small.
Geography. But I was like, I'm not really that worried about it because like there are opportunities for him, and Terry is really good at those types of throws specifically, right? And I look at the first play, and I think it's just the explosive play that gets them down inside the 5, and they're in quarters coverage. Cincinnati, like that play should probably be dead. But Terry runs an excellent release. He stacks the receiver. The receiver or the DB to me looks like he thinks he's going to run an out, so he kind of opens his hips. It's exactly what you want. You get it off the stem. It's a really subtle trick, really nice by Terry. Push that vertical. The guy's in trail position, and the quarters player, because you've widened, now cannot impact the throw. So, and again, the ball couldn't have been positioned any better. So obviously the protection's excellent on that. And that's another thing. Kliff did a great job of saying like, Trey Hendrickson is an absolute monster. Like I do a lot of consulting for defensive ends around the NFL, and watching what he does on a down-to-down basis in terms of anticipating the snap count, his rush angle, the strength of his hands, like he's a problem. But like Kliff knew it was going to be a problem, and the offensive staff knew it was going to be a problem. So there was I think maybe 5 times the whole game where the left tackle is without chip help. So there's a nice firm chip there, ball down the field, perfect ball. Great tracking by Terry. And that is almost the exact same play. It might be the exact same play that they called week 1 versus Tampa, and he missed the throw. It might be the same exact play. Like same exact stem, same exact read. And the only thing I don't know is like on this one, they had to dig on the backside. They might have had a double go in the first week. But that's essentially the same protection, same setup. And they missed it that one. And everyone's like, oh no, Terry's not in the offense. And now they hit it. And, great. And like, I think and then the explosive play at the end of the game, also same type of thing. Like they've run that route concept before 100%. And this time Terry wins. And Jaden, I mean, talk about like the throw of the year, like holy cow, delivers an absolute dime while getting smoked. But they've called those plays. Terry's had those opportunities and now they've hit them. And so great. Terry's in the offense again. And this is how it's going to be. It's like, this is the nature of playing receiver in the NFL. It's up and down, because you're relying on another person to see it and throw it. And hopefully Jaden now is developing that level of confidence and comfort with Terry where he'll do it more often.
Yeah, and if teams start like doing crazy stuff to take him out of the offense to prevent the deep stuff, there'll be other underneath stuff that opens up. They'll probably get him involved in other ways. They'll probably throw him a couple of screens or a pop pass or whatever, because I do think they understand the importance of getting him the ball, but like this is their preferred method of getting him the ball. And I can see why, because it scores touchdowns.
Right.
So there's that. The other guy that got involved more that I also like, I kind of had the same I'm not worried about it. Approach is Luke McCaffrey, because he was open a number of times in the first couple of weeks. Jaden just didn't see him, didn't hit him, didn't make the throw for whatever reason. And it's like, eventually that's going to happen. Those two have a great relationship. They've been working hard together all off season. Luke's a rookie. He'll earn that trust, and things will be fine. And he comes up with a few huge plays in this game, including obviously the fourth down, which I'd love for you to break down, where he gets into that second throwing window.
Yeah, which when I saw in the game, I was like, oh my gosh, great job by Jaden being patient. But after watching it, they're running like a lion concept, or what I would call lion. So slants, 3 slants to the offensive left. And then Noah Brown's running a comeback. And so he looks to the slants, and then great job by Jaden, like working your progression. And I think he's throwing the comeback, honestly, to Noah Brown. Like the ball is perfectly in line. And then Luke McCaffrey just runs underneath it. So I don't know who he's throwing the ball to, because his eyes snap to Noah Brown. Have you seen the play?
I've watched it back, but I didn't notice that. I thought that he did a great job of like letting Luke get to that second window, because
that's what I thought too. But then when you watch it from the end zone, especially the Cincinnati defensive perspective, it's like I kind of want to ask now, like, were you throwing it to Noah? Because you might have been, because they end up like stacking each other perfectly. It would have been a perfect throw to Noah Brown, but like Luke McCaffrey intercepts it kind of. Anyway, but like the process there, by either way, as my point is that Jaden is able to get off a concept, work to the second read, and it ends up, whether it is Luke or Noah, deliver an excellent football. And it's one of those things where it's like, when you're in your, like throughout the game, Jaden did a great job of that, of finding Luke through his progression. I think he hit Luke on a dig later too, where he works to the offensive right, play concepts dead, works kind of quickly. His feet are so good in the pocket, shifts his feet and delivers an absolute strike to Luke. So to me, it kind of goes back to like when your quarterback's playing well, you can get to other parts of the progression. You can get to other parts of the offense. And I think it just speaks to kind of the thing we talked about at the top of the show with Jaden Daniels being in his bag in a way that he has not been, in terms of like trusting the process, being patient, working your progression.
If that was an awkward edit, we apologize, because I had to go back and watch what Logan was talking about. There is a 1,000% chance that Jaden Daniels was throwing to Noah Brown on that fourth down. I can't believe I didn't notice that when I watched it.
Yeah, it was funny because I was like, oh, this is such a good play. And it took me, because sometimes I watch because on good plays like that, I'll watch the wide, I'll watch the end zone, and I'll watch the opponent end zone. And so I watched all the end zones. Then I got to the opponent end zone, and I'm like, he's looking directly at Noah here. And his feet, it's the feet, how they snap to Noah. Like Luke's covered, he's not even in that window. And Luke intercepts a pass for a nice gain on fourth down.
Yeah, on NFL Pro they don't have both end zones. I just get the one. So, but it seems, once you said it, because at first I was like, hey, it's zone, so they tell you, sit down versus zone, and Luke does, but he realizes that he's dead and sitting there on fourth down is not going to do anything. So great job of getting to the second window. No, I think you're 100% right. That's so funny. I might put that on Twitter for the folks to see, because that is outstanding. Okay, last but not least on the offense, the offensive line. How do we think they did, both from how they were set up by Kliff to how they ultimately executed what they were asked to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one area of the game where I'd kind of say for Kliff, maybe we can improve a little. I improve it. Like Kliff we called one of the best games I've ever seen. So improvement's maybe not the wrong word, but like diversifying runs a little bit. I know we're really good at running zone read, but I think there were times in the game where like Cincinnati knew that, and they're filing and they're blitzing in a way that takes away tight zone runs. And so I think you saw a lot of that with B-Rob's like inefficiency, especially as the game went on. Like they had a good plan. And so I think you saw like kind of when they ran the double trap, how that ends up being explosive, when they run the outside zone late in the fourth quarter, where that ends up being like a 6-7 yard gain. Just from, and sometimes it's hard as a play caller, but like just remembering you've got different options in terms of ball handling and the angle of the back to kind of mess with the offensive line's fits. But I do think the offensive line, man, they're a fun group to watch. Like Tyler Biotish on B-Rob's touchdown, like they're running like a little like nose guard stunt to the offensive right, and then the linebackers blitzing the A gap. For him to pass that off to Cosme, I mean, Cosme is playing really well too. To overtake the nose, Biotish to pass it off and have the footwork base to kind of work up to that linebacker, and B-Rob just to walk in. Like those three guys on the inside are playing really, really good football. Wiley, I mean, everyone's talking about him and how he's elevated by this Kliff offense. Like, this is what I anticipated them doing with him last year.
Right.
He is a great mover. He's super bendy. He's like the perfect run blocking right tackle. You can run a lot of screens with him. Like, he's playing well. I think you saw flashes of Brandon Coleman too. Like you saw shades of something pretty special. I think he gets away with a holding call on Hendrickson maybe twice, but like they weren't calling it. Like, but in terms of the movement skills, the strength, the ability to kick, like, and vertically set, one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. Like, he's coming along. And I think you see the value add, like when you look at him and how he compares to Wiley, for example. They're similar athletes. And so when you can get him cooking and the screen game is going to come alive, the outside zone game is going to come alive in a way that as well as Lucas is playing and as well as he does as a pass protector, he does hurt you. And then he's limited athletically because of his height and his size. So I think that's something that I'm excited about. And I've heard other people say, he's the tackle of the future. I'm not ready to go there yet, but he had a very solid game. And I think as he continues to improve, if he can kind of figure it out, like that's another thing that's going to give this offense a little bit of a bump in an area where they want to be good, which is running the football.
Yeah, I still feel like there's occasionally some mental mistakes, which you'd expect. He's technically played 3 games, but he's played half of 3 games, if that. So he's still figuring it out. Sometimes where you're like, hey, buddy, you don't have inside help here. Can you not give up the inside? And he's kind of looking like, hey, Nick, where are you? And Nick's like, I'm over here where I'm supposed to be. So there's a couple of
on the sack, right?
Yeah. It looks like he's on the man side of his slide on that one.
That's a great rush by dude. Trey Hendrickson's a beast.
Yeah,
dude. That's a really sick rush by him. Yeah, and that's something he had. Honestly, to your point, like he struggled with that in training camp. Like I always talk about the pass rushers line. Like you should be in between. Like if I were to draw a straight line, when I pause the tape and I draw a straight line between you and the quarterback, that's your pass protecting line. So usually it's slightly inside of where you think it should be, and your outside eye is to that rusher's inside eye.
Right, because you want to make them go the long way around.
Right, and you can set like a bull. You can set like a power rush there because you got a base. You're on the line. Like that's where he has to go. He has a tendency, even in training camp, to overset that line a little bit. And I think it goes back to the fact that he's relatively new to football. He didn't play a lot of tackle last year. So I'm not saying this as a criticism, but I'm saying as an area of improvement. And again, like Trey Hendrickson is one of the best rushers in the NFL at this thing. So when he feels you off your line, he's going to take advantage of it, and he's incredibly powerful. But I do think like that's something that showed up in camp a little bit, showed up in the game. And again, I think he had a very solid performance throughout this game. So I'm not like being critical of him, but I think there's still areas, to your point, where there's some growth that can still occur. But I think when he figures it out, and again, I think as the experience gets more comprehensive, like he's going to be a really nice value add in terms of what this offense looks like and wants to be moving forward.
The other thing that I noticed from him that I love, and we'll probably talk about this more on the defensive side, is you see why Peters loves him in terms of the play style. Like there's a couple times where Eckler, McNichols, whoever gets a chip and Hendrickson goes down, and Coleman's just like, I'm going to finish this block. Yeah. It's not like I'm going to sit here and babysit this guy and kind of put a hand on him as he's on the ground. It's like, no, you're down. I'm falling on top of you. I'm getting my pancake. And like that desire to finish, and you see it with Sinnott blocking, on the Eckler touchdown, 30 yards down the field. Like I'm gonna run this dude straight out the club. Like you see,
there's an edge to the guys. I mean, it's funny because when you see Coleman around the building, he seems like this very kind of like mild-mannered person, but on the outside zone to B-Rob, which is one of the best blocks by anybody in the game, like he's reaching number 58. You see the footwork, you see the athleticism to kind of overtake and make him feel that stretch. He throws that guy to the ground, and then I don't know if he's talking to the guy, but he like steps over him and looks directly down at him, which is a little bit of like, that dude's got some dog, if that's what he's doing. And again, you'd have to ask him about it, but like that's one of those things on film where you're like, I didn't know you had that in you, my guy. You know what I'm saying? Right. So that's been fun. And, Sinnott, you knew you had that from day one because that was his reputation. You saw that in college. But to see some of these other guys kind of embrace it, Allegretti's kind of nasty that way. Cosby's nasty that way. And maybe those guys are rubbing off on him. But I think that's something that's exciting, is that kind of that edge with the athleticism, with the length. And you're like, man, if he figures it out, that could be a dangerous asset to this team. Yeah, no, the draft class definitely. You're like, that's an Adam Peters guy. That's an Adam Peters guy, and you love to see it. Anything else on the offense? As we've talked about it for 45 minutes here. Dude, the Austin Eckler thing, the Austin Eckler effect is
yeah.
tremendous. I mean, I think we have to talk about him. Like his juice on these screens, on these runs is tremendous. And I know B-Rob's a special player, but they like complement each other perfectly. And I think them going to Arizona and him on the concussion protocol, that's going to be something they're going to have to figure out how they replace that. You know, because I think even with the screen to Zach Ertz late in the game, that's one that usually goes to Austin, right? And Austin's going to take that and make that a 15-yard gain. And so where do you find those kind of sneaky explosives that Austin's been? Like, think about it. He gave you an explosive reception against New York. He gave you an explosive run against New York. He gave you an explosive touchdown in this game. He gave you an explosive return. Those things are significant when we're talking NFL 2024 about finding and manufacturing explosives. Here's a guy that has just given you probably 6 over the course of the season, right? And so now offensively, how do we replace that? I think is going to be something really interesting. But he's done an excellent job.
No, that's a great point. And since you sang the praises of Eckler, I will quickly of B-Rob, because I know the numbers don't look good, but he did a lot of dirty work in this game. Where you know, I haven't looked it up, but I would assume his success rate is a lot higher than like his yards per gain would suggest, because there's a lot of like 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2s, and he gets the job done. So, you know, shout out to B-Rob on that.